The Christmas morning sun was shining brightly over the city, turning the fresh snow into thousands of tiny diamonds, but inside the largest house on the hill, there was not a single sound of celebration. No laughter, no children running through the halls, no family gathered around a table. There was only silence, and a woman sitting alone beside a perfectly decorated Christmas tree, staring at a phone that had not rung all morning. Valentina Cross had everything money could buy. She was the CEO of one of the fastest-growing technology companies in the country, owned a beautiful mansion, drove cars most people only dreamed about, and wore jewelry worth more than some houses. Yet on Christmas Day, surrounded by luxury, she had never felt more completely alone. What happened that afternoon would change the meaning of home for her forever. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness can give someone a second chance and that sometimes the smallest act of compassion can change a person's life, please like this story, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Midnight Tales. Your support helps these emotional stories reach more people. Valentina had learned long ago that success could make people stand beside you without ever truly being with you. Her employees respected her, business partners feared disappointing her, and strangers admired her photographs in magazines. But respect was not the same as love. 3 years earlier, her parents had died in an accident just days before Christmas. Since then, the holiday had become a reminder of everything she had lost. She had stopped visiting relatives because every family gathering felt like an empty chair waiting for her parents. Instead, she buried herself in work. Every December, she promised herself that next year would be different. Every December, she ended up alone again. That Christmas morning, Valentina had planned to spend the entire day inside. She wore an expensive cream sweater, made coffee she barely touched, and walked from room to room without knowing why. At around noon, she noticed something unusual through the tall front windows. A man was standing outside the gates in the snow. He was not dressed like a wealthy visitor. His coat was old, his shoes were covered with snow, and he carried a small paper bag in one hand. His name was Kieran, a maintenance worker who had once repaired something at Valentina's company. She recognized him immediately, but she had never known much about his life. Kieran had come because the security system at the estate had malfunctioned, and he had been asked to check it before the evening. But when Valentina opened the door, she saw that he was shivering. She noticed the red marks on his hands and the tiredness beneath his eyes. Instead of treating him like another employee, she invited him inside and told him to warm himself before checking anything. Kieran hesitated, almost embarrassed by the enormous house surrounding him, but eventually stepped into the warmth. While Kieran worked, Valentina watched him from a distance. He did not complain about the cold or the holiday interruption. He simply did his job. Then she noticed the little paper bag he had carried inside. It contained 2 homemade cinnamon rolls and a small Christmas card. He explained that he had intended to bring them to his younger sister, but she had been called into work and could not come home. The rolls were left over from what he had baked that morning. Valentina looked at the simple food as though it were something priceless. For the first time that day, she smiled. They ate lunch together at the enormous dining table that had been designed to seat 14 people. Yet there were only 2 plates. Somehow, the giant room felt smaller with another person sitting across from her. Kieran spoke about ordinary things, his sister, his childhood, the tiny apartment he had grown up in, and how his mother used to insist that Christmas did not need expensive gifts. Valentina listened quietly. She realized she could remember the value of almost every item inside her mansion, but she could not remember the last time someone had simply sat with her and talked without wanting something. As afternoon faded into evening, snow continued falling outside. Kieran eventually finished his work and prepared to leave. Valentina walked him toward the door, suddenly aware that the house would become silent again the moment he stepped outside. She watched him pull on his gloves, and something inside her broke through the wall she had spent years building. She quietly asked him if he could stay. Kieran looked surprised, but she quickly explained that she did not mean anything complicated. She simply did not want to spend another Christmas night alone. Then, almost embarrassed by her own honesty, she lowered her eyes and said, "Can you stay for just one night?" Kieran could have misunderstood her request, but the sadness in her face made the truth clear. She was not asking for romance. She was asking for company. She was asking someone not to let the silence win. So he stayed. That evening, they did not attend an expensive party or open extravagant gifts. They made hot chocolate in the kitchen, watched old Christmas movies, and decorated 2 forgotten gingerbread cookies that Valentina had bought months earlier. At one point, Kieran found a dusty box in the storage room containing ornaments from Valentina's childhood. She opened it reluctantly and discovered an old photograph of herself standing between her parents beside a small Christmas tree. She began crying. Kieran did not tell her to stop. He simply sat beside her and let her remember. Valentina finally understood that grief did not disappear when you became successful. Sometimes you could build a company, buy a mansion, and become powerful enough to command a room, yet still remain the same frightened person who missed her parents. For years, she had believed being strong meant never needing anyone. That night, she learned something different. Sometimes strength meant admitting that you were lonely. The next morning, sunlight poured through the windows. Valentina woke expecting the familiar emptiness, but she heard laughter from downstairs. Kieran was in the kitchen trying to make breakfast, and the smell of burnt toast filled the mansion. She stood at the top of the stairs and laughed for the first time on Christmas in years. But the biggest surprise came later. Kieran did not become her employee, and Valentina did not simply hand him a reward for staying. Instead, she invited him to help her start a foundation for workers and families who could not afford to celebrate holidays together. She wanted to build something that money alone could never buy, a place where lonely people could come and feel that they belonged. Months passed, and the mansion changed. The dining table was no longer empty. Valentina began inviting employees, neighbors, and families who had nowhere else to go. Christmas was no longer a painful reminder of what she had lost. It became a chance to give someone else what she had needed for years. Kieran remained part of her life, not because she needed rescuing, but because he had reminded her that even the richest person in the world could need a simple human presence. Their friendship slowly became something deeper, built not on wealth or status, but on trust, patience, and the quiet understanding that neither of them had to face life alone. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who may be feeling lonely, and subscribe to Midnight Tales for more stories about kindness, hope, and second chances. And before the ending, here is a special request. Please comment, a little kindness can change everything, if you believe no one should have to spend their hardest days alone. Years later, whenever Christmas arrived, Valentina would look at the old photograph of her parents and remember the snowy afternoon when a simple request changed her life. She had once believed that Christmas was about everything she had lost. Now she understood that Christmas was about what she could still give. Because sometimes, a lonely heart does not need a miracle. Sometimes, it only needs someone to stay.